Welcome to All Home Care Matters, the show where we discuss all things home care, with discussions on important age-related matters and topics. Brought to you by Enriched Life Home Care Services, the #1 rated home care provider in Michigan by Top Rated Local.
Hello, and welcome back to All Home Care Matters. If this is your first time visiting us here at the show, we want to say thank you for taking time out to be with us today. We appreciate how valuable everyone's time is, and that's why we try and make each episode here at All Home Care Matters something that will hopefully matter to you. Today, we are honored to welcome a remarkable guest, Katherine Klimitas, speaker, author, and gifted artist. She's here to share her story of Osteogenesis Imperfecta. Welcome, Katherine.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here.
Well, we're glad to have you. So, Katherine, real quick, let's start with give us a little background about you and your age and where you're from.
Sure. So I am from New Orleans, Louisiana. I live right outside of New Orleans. I am 33 years old, and I am an artist and graphic designer. So I graduated from Loyola University, New Orleans in 2011, and right after I opened my own art and design business that I run out of my home today.
And I will say, and your art is exceptionally beautiful and truly remarkable. And for those that are listening and may not be watching the show, why don't you explain what might make that a little more remarkable than just your average artist? What makes you you?
What makes me me? Well, one minor detail is that I have a genetic bone disease called Osteogenesis Imperfecta. It's better known as brittle bone disease, but it basically means that my bones break easily and they grow abnormally. So I am actually only 2'7", and I use an electric wheelchair to move around. I have an aide with me almost all the time because I can't do a lot of my daily activities by myself. So I need somebody to help me go to the bathroom and get food and all those kinds of things. And so I found over the years that it's easier for me to function while lying down because it's hard on my back to sit up for a long time. It's hard for me to hold my arm up and do things for a long time. And so when I'm laying on my side, in particular when I'm painting or drawing, I can support my arm with my body. And so I actually paint and draw while lying on my side. So yeah, it's a little bit different. It's a very unique perspective, and it's something that I had to learn to compensate for because things look very different lying down than they do sitting up. But I learned, and it works. It works for me.
Well, and I will say it definitely works because we have some wonderful pictures of the paintings that you have painted. And if I did not know better, you would not know any different that this was not painted sitting up or standing up, but it was done in a lying position, which I think you had mentioned when we spoke previously. You don't know of any other artists that paint the way you do with your method of laying down.
I don't. Offhand, I mean, I'm sure there are some. I don't, I know of some artists who don't have arms who paint with their feet. I know of some that paint with their mouths. But I offhand don't know of any that paint lying down.
Sure.
Like I said, I'm sure they exist.
So what I want to kind of delve into, because I'm sure there are some viewers and listeners that they may not have osteogenesis imperfecta, but they may have some other form of disability or, other type of a handicap that's viewed as a handicap. So with osteogenesis imperfecta, it's very easy because it's called, the common name, brittle bone disease. Easy to break bones. What is that like? I mean, is it something, how easy is it to break a bone, and is there pain associated with it?
Yes, so it is very easy to break a bone. People ask me a lot, how many bones have you broken? And I tell them that we stopped counting around 500 when I was 10. Oh. So yeah, it's very easy. Now, that being said, when you hit puberty and you get that surge of hormone, it does tend to slow the breaking down. So it's much. I don't break major bones nearly as often as I used to. However, I mean, I can sneeze in the wrong position and break a rib. That happened to me last month. That's not uncommon for me at all. I had somebody accidentally bump my foot wrong 2 weeks ago and broke it in a couple places. And yeah, I mean, it hurts. Like, there's nothing wrong with my nerve endings. So I feel it just as much as, you would feel it. The only thing is that because my bones are so soft and they're not as calcified as most people's, there's not as much there to heal, right? So it takes a lot less time for me to heal than it would for you. So normally, like if I break a rib, it takes a week. I mean, we're not talking about a long time, unless it's really particularly bad. But in general, like a week is a pretty good timing for rib healing. Now my foot I've still got some issues with my foot because it was broken in a couple spots, and I think the bones probably moved into places they're not supposed to be. But yeah, I mean, it's getting better. It's functional and I can use it. It's just still kind of hurts.
So, if it's okay with you, Catherine, I'd like to kind of start at the beginning, so to speak. When when did your parents first find out or realize that you had osteogenesis imperfecta? Was this right from birth, the gestation? Or?
Yes. Yeah. So 2 weeks before I was born, they did an ultrasound and they realized that my a lot of my limbs were bowed. So, the bones weren't straight. They saw several breaks. I think I was born with 11 broken bones. So yeah, so obviously they diagnosed it then. It's funny you asked that though, because one interesting thing about osteogenesis imperfecta, is that the variation in severity is vast. There are people with less severe types who look relatively normal. Like they might be a little shorter than the general population. And of course, they have a lot of the characteristics that all people with OI have, but you wouldn't necessarily know they had it by looking at them, unless you know exactly what to look for. They usually break, 3 to 5 bones, normally around the time they grow. So normally anywhere between 5 and teenage years. And they may not even know they have it until that happens. So what happens is, and this is really unfortunate, what happens is if they don't know that they have it, or the parents don't know, and the kid shows up at school with a broken arm and they can't tell you how they broke it, then unfortunately, or fortunately, but CPS is called. And, a lot of parents are accused of child abuse because they don't, that's how it looks to somebody on the outside, right? And then there's the other side of the spectrum, which is me, and even worse. I'm like the most severe type, where you don't die before you're 2 years old, essentially. The most severe type is type 2, and people with type 2 don't develop, like their chest cavity doesn't develop, and their skull doesn't develop, so therefore their organs can't develop. And a lot of times they don't make it past gestation. They don't make it past birth. So yeah, so it's a huge it's a huge variety. Yeah.
So, as a parent myself, your main goal is to have a healthy, happy child, right? And I think you're a testimony and a testament to what can come of a situation that may not be ideal. When was it, so your parents find out, 2 weeks prior to your birth.
Mhm.
What's your first memory of finding out, okay, I might not be like my cousins or, the neighbors or the other kids?
Well, I don't know that I have a first memory. I mean, this is normal for me. This is not, I mean, this is how my life has always been.
Right.
I mean, I don't remember a life without breaking a bone.
But what I'm
You
saying,
know,
is, do you have a memory of when it was like, how did you find out that you had OI?
um, I, I mean, I think I was just told it from the beginning. I mean, yeah, it, um, I mean, I'm sure there were moments when I started school,
Mhm.
because my mom put me in like a twos and threes program, because I was really bored and she had to do something with me. Um, and, I'm sure there were moments where I didn't understand why I couldn't go do the things, the other kids were doing, or why I couldn't be like the other kids. But I mean, it was never like in my family, it was never like a bad thing. It
Right.
just was,
Sure.
So, yeah, I don't know. Um, I mean, yeah, certainly I remember in school there being moments of, yeah, I can't go do that.
Okay.
But I mean, it wasn't, and of course it was frustrating, and of course there were times where I was mad and it wasn't fair and, all that stuff. But, I mean, it wasn't, I don't know that there was a specific moment where I realized I like had OI and that I was
Okay.
different. Yeah.
Well, and you touched on, so your mom put you in a two and threes program, and then
Mhm.
you're kind of beginning your elementary school and middle school, high school. What was the experience like with other kids? Were you bullied a lot, or is it more accepted and understood, or because kids can be very
Um,
cruel?
oh yes, I mean very yes, kids can be very difficult, especially girls. I feel like girls can be really difficult. I'm very lucky because I went to a private grade school that was very family oriented. It
Mhm.
was very small, and I mean, yes, I picked on some, yeah, I mean, but no more than any preteen girl would be.
Okay.
And it wasn't ever, I mean, there may have been one or two times where my disability came up, but it wasn't usually because of that. It was usually just, I mean, it was normal teenage girl stuff, stupid teenage girl stuff. Um, but I was the only person in my school up until my senior year of high school in a wheelchair.
Wow.
So yeah, so you know, yeah, it's kind of interesting because on one hand, yeah, I was different and I did have to do some things differently, and I had some special accommodations in school, like having my aid and not being in the halls at the same time as everyone else, and having a table to lay on in class and that kind of thing. Um, but at the same time, my parents made sure that my teachers held me to the same standards as everyone else. So like if I acted out, I still got punished. You know,
Right.
now I was a really good kid, so I rarely did that. But in the few times that I did, I still got punished just like my friends did.
Mhm.
Um, and I still was held, try to get the same good grades as everyone else, and all that stuff. So, um, yeah, I mean, I don't know how I didn't usually feel different. Let's put it that way.
Okay. Wonderful.
Usually,
Well, and
yeah.
that was going to lead to this question about how your parents had handled your disability. How it seems like you handled it really exceptionally well. And how did your parents handle it on their side of things?
Well, I handled it well because my parents handled it well.
Okay.
I mean, that's a huge reason. My parents, a lot of parents with kids with OI tend to bubble wrap them.
Mhm.
They tend to not let them go out and do anything, not put them in positions where they could get hurt. And my parents said, well, you can break a bone when you sneeze. So, I mean, I kind of, yeah, if you want to go out and do something or you want to go out and try something, then, I mean, within reason, obviously, we're going to let you go try it. And we're going to encourage you to go try it. And we're going to teach you that even though you have this really difficult physical challenge, we are not going to, we're not going to let you just sit at home and do nothing.
Wonderful.
And I know a couple of kids with OI whose parents did exactly that. They let them sit at home and do nothing. And now, they're adults and they don't really contribute. They are still sitting at home and doing nothing.
Sure.
So, that's a problem.
Right.
Yeah.
What were your doctoring and healthcare appointments like as a child? Did you spend a lot of time at doctor's offices, or was it just a normal?
No, actually. So my parents are veterinarians, which I'm sure you just heard my dog bark in the background. My parents are veterinarians, and so and my grandfather is an MD also, so that helps a lot. I have a family who's mostly in the medical field. So I had people living in my house that knew how to like I broke my arm, they knew how to splint it. And I didn't necessarily need to go to a doctor every time I broke a bone, because, and a lot of people don't understand this, but when you break 500 bones by the time you're 10, you know when something's broken, and
Right.
you know where it's broken, and you know how bad it is. You just do. I mean, it's just learning by experience. And so, I can tell when something's broken or how badly it's broken or whatever. And so, I mean, getting an x-ray is it's not even worth doing. It's not, there's no reason. Because, I mean, I already know. I say this all the time. If I got an x-ray for every time I broke a bone, I would glow. Because, it's a lot of radiation. So anyway, so yeah, and the other thing is through their offices, through the veterinary offices, we were able to sometimes get even better material than we could get in the hospital to do any kind of splinting or casting that I might need. And the other thing is, unfortunately, for most doctors and nurses and healthcare practitioners, OI is a sentence or maybe a paragraph in a book. They don't learn any about this disease in great detail because it's not very common. And so they don't know, like for example, I remember when I was really young, we went to the hospital because I broke my arm, like lower on my arm. And whoever saw me splinted it, casted it, whatever, but they casted it with such heavy material that it broke my shoulder because it was too heavy. And so, had they listened to us and just taped my arm to my body so that my body stabilized it and it couldn't move, I would have been fine. So it's not that doctors treat it. I mean, it's not like they mean to treat it badly. They just don't. A lot of them just don't know. They have no experience with it. So for me, going to a hospital is just not a great experience in general. Now, I did have 4 surgeries to put rods in my arms and legs, which helped a lot because basically they put a rod through my long bones and it gave them strength. So, in the times that they did break, they weren't breaking apart. They were breaking around the rod, and so it was much quicker to heal. And also, it just strengthened the bone in general, so they didn't break nearly as often. So when I had those surgeries done, obviously I spent some time in the hospital and with doctors, but I was lucky. I had a great doctor, a great orthopedist in New Orleans. Unfortunately, he just retired a couple years ago, but he was actually the head of Tulane Hospital here in New Orleans, Tulane Orthopedics, and he was like the first doctor to do this surgery on somebody with OI at the severity I have. And I was really young. I was only like 4. So it was kind of a pioneering surgery. And I joke all the time that I put him on the map, but anyway, yeah, so not a lot of doctors. The other thing is my mom went into homeopathic veterinary medicine. So we do a lot of natural medicine and a lot of natural remedies. I don't take a lot of narcotics. I can probably count on one hand how many times I've taken a narcotic in my life. I mean, I do take over the counter stuff like Motrin and Excedrin and that kind of thing, but that's about it. And so that's also been very helpful to me.
Sure. Now, you've had the surgery, you got the rods in your long bones. Did that affect your mobility more because of the weight of the rods, or not really?
No.
Oh.
No, I mean, they're titanium. They're very, very light. And what's really cool about the rods in my legs is that they're telescopic. And so, you know, I got them when I was 4. And although I didn't grow a ton, I still grew.
Sure.
And so they grew with my bones, which is really cool. They didn't have to ever be replaced or anything like that. Yeah.
So now let's talk about your art career. Now,
Sure.
I understand you sold your first painting when you were only 10 years old.
Yes.
Do you remember who did you sell it to?
So that's a really funny story. My teacher in grade school, who was a brilliant artist, brilliant man, he is probably the person that's the most responsible for bringing out my creativity. But I don't remember exactly how this came up, but somehow he had certain students doing projects for some fundraiser for the SPCA here in New Orleans, for that where the pieces were going to be auctioned off in a very well-known gallery here. And I don't remember all the details surrounding it, but he had me do one, and it was huge. It was called All Dogs Go to Heaven, and it was much bigger than I was, which is not something I do anymore. But it was much bigger than I was, and it was all these angel cartoony looking dogs, and I mean, it was cute.
Yeah.
And they went in the gallery, and my dad got outbid on it. My dad was not, he was kind of cheap, quite honestly. There's no better way to put that. So he was very stingy with his money. And so he got outbid. And yeah, I sold it. I mean, obviously, I didn't get any of the money because this was for a fundraiser. But yeah, I think he got outbid by like $100. I don't remember exactly, but yeah, I never let him live that down. But yeah, that was my first piece. And then, as I said, my parents were veterinarians, and so I would go to their office on the weekends, especially, and hang out with them. And a lot of times, I'd be bored, so I'd sit in the waiting room, and while the clients were waiting to see my parents, I would paint their dogs or their cats just because I was bored, just for fun. And at some point, they started paying me to do that.
Wow.
You know, they'd say, here's $20, or here's $40, or here's $60, or whatever. And as a preteen, it's pretty cool to start making money, you know, just by painting a picture, you know. So I did that, and that's kind of how it started.
So that became your love.
It did.
Yeah.
It did.
And is that why you do exclusively animals, correct?
I do. Yeah. Every once in a while, you can get me to do a house or a flower or something like that. But very rarely. I have to really like you to want to do that.
Now, what did you choose as your main medium for painting?
I actually chose watercolor. My mom gave me my first watercolor set when I was 5. And it was one of those really cheap KAK watercolor sets. You get it, Michael's or Walmart or whatever. But I really liked it, and I went through it within a couple of days. And that was the point where my parents realized that art was something that, could keep me busy for one thing, because I was driving them completely insane. And also something I really liked and that I was actually pretty good at, even as a 5-year-old. So they put me in a lot of classes after that. I was obviously getting art in school, but then after that, I was doing summer camps. I was doing after school art classes. I was doing private art lessons. I had a college professor teaching me at a college level privately in high school. And that's actually kind of where I started becoming more professional and less like the line between hobby and professional was kind of crossed there. But yeah, so I got to try all kinds of things. I got to try acrylic and oil and sculpture, and I did a summer glass blowing camp and stained glass and printmaking and all kinds of things. And I think, first of all, I love watercolor just because I find it easy to work with. Most people don't, but I do. And then also, I can keep it pretty confined. Like I don't have to move around a whole lot to do it, and I think that's just obviously convenient for me. And then I don't know. It's where I started, and that's just where I ended up.
Do you ever think about what your life may be like if your mom hadn't bought you those water paints?
Yeah, sometimes I do, and most people with OI, assuming they work, they end up in some kind of computer-based job or like data entry. There are people who have become lawyers and doctors and things like that, but it's the more common job is something like that, or sales, or something where you're relatively sedentary. But that being said, there are lots of people with OI who are graphic designers and gamers and game developers, web designers, things like that. So I don't know. I don't know if I feel like one way or another I would have gotten into art somehow.
Okay.
I don't know how, but I feel like one way or another it would have happened.
What did you get an art degree when you went to Tulane?
I did. I got a graphic design degree.
Okay.
So when I went into college, I did begin my college career majoring in fine art. But then I realized that in order to make a living as a fine artist, I would have to put out an enormous amount of work. And physically, it was impossible. Like there was no way I was going to be able to put out enough art to make enough money to live. There's a reason they call them starving artists. I through, I guess, the end of my freshman year, I said, okay, well, this is not going to work. So I'm going to switch into graphic design major, which all the prerequisites, they were all the same. So it's not like I was, adding a year or anything like that. Like it was perfect time to switch over. And graphic design, that's what I graduated in. It allows me to, do more commercial type art, so I'm doing branding packages and logos and a little bit of web design. And right now I do a lot of social media marketing for different small businesses and nonprofits and things like that. So, that allows me, I kind of look at it as a different medium, but how can I say this? It's much more goal oriented, like when I paint something, yeah, I want it to look like the animal I'm painting, but I have a decent amount of creativity, and artistic license I can take with that. But when you're designing for a client, there's a goal in mind, sure. Right? So, like if somebody says I need a 5x7 invitation, I can't say, I think I'll make it 4x6 instead. Like, it doesn't work like that. You can't do that.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, so it's a little more left brain, a little less right brain. It's a lot of problem solving. But I like the fact that I can use my brain in different ways, and I get bored really quickly. So it's really nice, that I can do both.
Sure. So, Katherine, walk us through what a typical day looks like as Katherine.
Okay. So a typical day. Well, my house is insane because I have 5 dogs. So they're crazy. But normally I have an aide. So I live with my mom, and she's still a veterinarian. She still practices, and she works literally all the time. So um, most of the time I get up with my aide who gets here, between 9 and 10, something like that. I get up with them, and then I get something to eat. And one major advantage of working from home is that I don't have to get dressed half the time, unless I'm on an interview or a meeting like this one. So, half the time I'm still in pajamas. And, normally I check my email, I check and see what clients need what for the day. I'm an avid list person. I like making lists. So, and I like checking lists off. So I normally, most of the time the night before, I make a list for the next day of things that I need to get done. So I start going down my list and figuring out what I need to do for the day. And then again, what clients need what done by when. Because that's another thing with graphic design is deadlines are a big deal. And then if I don't have a lot of design work to do, or I have a painting that needs to be done by a certain time, I paint. So, get something to eat, paint for a few hours, stop, take a break. We have a pool in our backyard that I swim in for exercise. So in theory, I do that 2 or 3 times a week. But the truth of the matter is that almost never happens. I try. That's like always my goal. But sometimes I get too busy. Sometimes I'm just too lazy. It just depends.
You need to put it on one of your lists, Katherine.
I know it gets on the list. It just sometimes gets taken off the list.
Okay.
Or moved to the bottom of the list. But then my aides are with me through the day, and then my mom gets home at night, and we hang out and watch TV, or we both run our own businesses, so oftentimes we are doing paperwork for one or the other
Sure.
at night. So that keeps us very busy. And again, I have 5 dogs, so there's always that. And they are very busy. So yeah, it's busy. And then, I'm not saying I never leave my house. I don't leave it that often, just because I work here, but if I have a meeting or a lunch date or something to go to, we go to that and whatever.
Well, and now, did you or your parents have to make any special accommodations so that you had the ability to work from home? And if so, what kind of accommodations did you have to make?
Yeah, a little bit. It's the same accommodations I had to live here, essentially. So, we have threshold ramps into our house. My bathroom is made so that it's convenient for me. I have a table to lay on. Actually, I have multiple tables to lay on. I have a room that's the art room, and it has all of my art supplies and all my work and stuff in it. We have really good internet, which is really important when you work from home.
Right.
Yeah, and most of my work is internet based, so yeah, that's key. And then my A's are here, but that's about it. I'm lucky because I don't need when you look at some people with disabilities, they need major accommodations, like roll-in showers and lifts and all that kind of stuff. And I'm lucky because I don't need that. I'm small and people can move me around, so I'm lucky. Now, my car has a lift in it, that's really important. And we travel with some small ramps and that kind of thing in case we need them wherever we're going. But yeah, that's about it.
Did you always think you would own your own business?
Pretty much.
Okay.
Pretty much.
That's
I grew up. Yeah, well, I grew up with both of my parents each own their own business. And so it was natural. I grew up learning about taxes and why everybody was so grouchy around April 15th. And I grew up, learning about managing employees, which, is not always a fun thing to do. I learned, the advantages of being able to set your own schedule. And the fact that I do lay down to work, I can easily accommodate that in my own house. If I was to work at a graphic design firm, which I did have offers to after I graduated from college. But if I was to do that, I would have to make sure they could make the accommodations I needed in order to work. And, I think it's fair to ask for that if you're the best person for the job. But, I also understand that not every business is able to do that. As a business owner, I get it. So yeah, I mean, it just, this is just what works. And then it does take time. I mean, it is really hard. I'm sure that anybody who owns their own business will tell you, like, finding clients, marketing yourself, running everything, the creative side and the business side. I mean, it is really hard, but it's also, I think it's worth it.
When you go out in public, do you get stares or any kind of reactions? How does it make you feel when you go out?
I mean, it's kind of a way of life for me. So it's annoying. I think one of the topics I like to speak on when I do public speaking events is school inclusion. Mm-hmm. Because I feel like if you include kids with disabilities in a mainstream setting, in a mainstream school setting, then the other kids grow up understanding how to act around people who might look a little bit different than they do. And so, like, for example, when I was growing up, like I said, I was the only person in my school in a wheelchair, but my classmates now as adults don't stare at people in wheelchairs, and they are not uncomfortable going up to people in wheelchairs and asking them questions or saying hello or just interacting with them in general. It doesn't, it's normal for them. And I think that if we start young, it would be more normal. But yeah, I mean, I get stared at a lot. And by kids, it doesn't really bother me just because they probably haven't had that experience yet,
Well, I was going to ask, Katherine, do you find, and maybe it's the same or maybe there's no difference, but do you see a difference between maybe adults react versus children? Because I tend to think of children being more innocent and
yes,
yeah.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah, it's innocent. I mean, it's not, and adults, it's obnoxious. I mean, yeah, it's very ignorant. And, by the time you're an adult, at some point you should have learned that staring is not a nice thing to do, and that's frustrating. I have another thing that happens to me all the time and probably will happen to me tonight because I'm going out tonight. But almost every time I'm in a very large group of people, there is either or both. There is either somebody who says, oh, my cousin, sister, aunt, friend is in a wheelchair. I know all about you. Okay, so there's that person. Or there's the person that says, oh, I'm a nurse, or I'm a physical therapist, or I work with wheelchairs, or I am a doctor. I know all about osteogenesis imperfecta. And I'm like, no, you probably don't. So I get that a lot. One of my hobbies is going to see live music and going to concerts. And almost every time there's one of those two. And they're usually drunk. But anyway, but yeah, it's that could be very, very frustrating because they don't know, unless they've had some kind of personal experience with somebody with OI. And even then, it can be so different from person to person.
Sure.
Right.
Well, like you mentioned, there's the moderately to the severe to the, and
Right.
And I think hopefully those people mean well when they're trying to say that rather
I
than,
think so.
rather than trying to tell you how to live your life and what you should be doing because nobody's going to know it better than you, right?
Right.
So how do you think your story has helped your art business? Because when I was looking at your art and, I'm a novice, I'm not an art expert, but I would never be able to tell that somebody with OI painted it or somebody with any sort of disability. I would think, wow, this is beautifully done and this must be a wonderfully professional artist. Have you had that
Well,
response?
thank you.
Oh, well, of
Thank
course,
you.
absolutely.
I do get that response. Most of the, look, I'm not the best artist in the world by far. But I'm good. I feel like I can hold my own in the art world, at least at this point. And, I think people see my art and they like it, they have this same reaction you do, but then, I think a lot of times what makes art impressive or what makes you feel something from art is the person behind it. And I think that's true with, even like the old masters, even Van Gogh, when you learn about his situation and his mental situation and the fact that he, he painted 200 paintings while he was in a mental asylum, and when you find out that story behind the painting, it makes the painting mean even more. And so I like doing things like this. I like doing interviews like this, and I like doing in-person art shows where I get to meet people, and they get to meet me, because then I feel like it makes, of course I want them to buy my art, but like I feel like it makes what they've purchased or what they've seen mean more to them.
Right.
You know,
It's a connection. Yeah. It
Yeah.
makes it real.
Yeah.
Now, this is a good spot here to say you're not only an artist and a public speaker, but Katherine, you're also an author. So tell us about your book.
Yeah, it's so weird for me to say I'm an author, and I have been for 10 years. Um, so writing is not like it's not exactly my thing, but I can write. I had a couple of really amazing English teachers in high school that taught me a lot. But anyway, so my book is called Looking Up. It began as my senior thesis in college, and basically, when we were given this assignment, we were told to do a project that only you can do. That was literally it. That's what our professors told us. Do a project that only you can do. So after a lot of thinking and a lot of project proposals, I ended up writing and designing this book called Looking Up, all about me and my perspective and everything we've talked about here today, plus a little bit. And it contains photography that I did. It contains anecdotes about things like when I go out in public, things people say to me, because there are some really good ones. But stories about when I've broken the most bones at one time, just my general outlook on life, things like that. So it's a nice little coffee table book. And obviously it's called Looking Up because I am physically constantly looking up, but also figuratively, I try to look up as well.
Sure.
And then I have a second book that I did not technically write. I illustrated, but it's called "Breed All About Us," and it's cute. I love this book, but anyway, I'm biased. But it's about it features 64 different dog breeds, and it's actually a collaboration I did with my neighbor, who is a writer, like a legitimate writer, and basically what we did was I painted portraits of 64 different dog breeds, and she wrote small little clips, like paragraphs, about each breed, and it's told from the dog's perspective. And we
Fun.
got all of our we got all of our information from people who actually own those dogs. So, it's personal. It's not just a list of facts,
It's not
of course.
generic. Yeah.
No, and of course we did mix some facts in because, we want it to be accurate, but it's things like we talk about the Saint Bernard who ate the couch, because literally I have a friend who had a Saint Bernard who came home one day and the couch had been completely eaten.
Wow.
So so it's things like that. And it's also a coffee table book. It's a fun little book. Kids love it. It's a great gift for dog lovers, So so those are the two books I have out at the moment.
Now, and I had mentioned before we talked about you being an author, you're also a public speaker. What do you usually speak on, and why did you start speaking to different groups? And what kind of groups do you speak to?
So public speaking is kind of new. I mean, I guess I kind of started in high school, a little bit. Like I had been asked to speak to a couple of groups in high school, and it was not, I don't feel like that was at a very professional level, because, I was in high school. But mostly I speak to groups that fall into one of three categories, essentially. So one would be school inclusion. So I talk about, the advantages to having disabled kids mixed in with able-bodied kids in schools. And most of the time that audience is educators or just students or, something like that. And then I have a medically based talk that I do to mostly some kind of medical field students. So it's usually like physical therapy students or occupational therapy students or sometimes med students, but that's more technical. That has more to do with OI and how I live with it. And I usually try to encourage them to learn their protocols, but then to think outside of them, because I think that's what really needs to be done in a lot of cases, not just mine. And then just general motivation, which is loosely based on my book, Looking Up.
Well, and I think motivation is an excellent one, because I just want to touch on this before we go to the next question. When you and I spoke, I said, I think a good topic would be overcoming osteogenesis imperfecta, because, and if I'm off, I apologize, but I feel like given what you've had to deal with and what you've gone through, you have done more with what you've been given than a lot of people do who have no limitations and no disabilities. And I think that should inspire those people as well. If it's almost like you could say, well, if I can do it, you have no excuse not to.
I agree. I agree. And, you use that word overcoming, and I guess that's accurate, but I kind of lean more towards like the phrase living with, just because like, overcoming makes me feel like someday it's going to go away, and it's just not. Like it's not going to happen. But I've found a positive way to live with it most days. So.
And I've told you, I just think you're so remarkable and inspirational, Katherine, and hopefully these, listeners and viewers who may be going through anything. It may not even be a disability. It could be a tragedy. It could be, a depression or, a loss of a loved one. And, the name of your book, I think, is so suiting for who you are and, looking up. I think that's, a wonderful name for your story.
Thank you.
Yeah. So speaking of which, what do you think is one thing that has helped you to live with or overcome osteogenesis imperfecta?
Oh, I mean, my parents for sure. The fact that they did not bubble wrap me, they always encouraged me to go out and do all the things I want to do. Like, for example, going to college was never a question. It was, you're going to college. Like, there was no like, yeah, if you really don't want to, it's fine. Yeah, no, that's not how it worked. No. And I mean, of course, there were days where I needed to be, and I was, because, I had a bunch of broken bones and I felt horrible. But even then, that was as short lived as it could be. My mom is a very realistic person. And so she always said, you're going to have to find a way to live with this, because otherwise you're just going to be completely miserable. So, and she's right, So, yeah, I mean, without the encouragement from my parents, I mean, yeah, my life would be totally different than it is now.
What do you have any projects in the works that you want to share with us now?
So I just had a show at the end of last year, my first museum show, which was like,
wonderful,
as an artist, like a big thing. It was at the West Baton Rouge Museum in Port Allen, which is right outside of Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And that was Louisiana birds. So I had 26 paintings of Louisiana birds. Yeah, and that went really well. I'm trying to figure out what I'm doing this year. This year, I got completely inundated with pet portraits at Christmas last year. And I mean, I am just recently, I would say within the last month, catching up.
Wow.
Yeah, it was absolutely insane. It's what, June 10th? I've done 33 pet portraits. No, 34. 33 or 34 pet portraits already this year. And I mean, that's more than I do in a full year, oftentimes. So it's been a little crazy, but it's been great.
I would say so.
Yeah, but it's been great. It just means that I haven't had the time to think about, a series that I want to do for either the end of the year or the beginning of next year. One thing that did happen this year that's really exciting is we have a zoo here in New Orleans called Audubon Zoo, and it's actually ranked 6th in the country. That just came out this week, and it's a really, really nice, well-respected zoo. And my greeting cards with my art on them will be carried there, hopefully starting next week. So I'm very excited about that. That's like a huge deal. Yeah. So yeah, and I mean, I'm focusing a little more on public speaking now that the pandemic has eased off a little bit and people are actually gathering. There are actually groups to speak to. So I just spoke to a local women's business association a couple weeks ago, and I have a Rotary Club that I'm speaking to on Monday night. So yeah, I mean, I'm always looking for speaking engagements like that.
Have you been invited to speak outside of Louisiana yet?
Not recently.
Okay.
But yes, but not recently.
Okay.
Yeah, I did this was several years ago, but there is a conference called Inclusion Works, and it's about school inclusion. And I spoke at that in Austin, I believe, a few years ago. Yeah.
Okay.
So what makes Katherine tick? What keeps you going?
What keeps me going? Well, I mentioned I love live music. I love it. Like it's I always say I live for my next concert, which, as it happens, is tonight.
Who you seeing, Katherine? Who you seeing?
George Bentley.
Okay.
George Bentley. Yeah, I'm so excited. yeah, that might have been the hardest part of the whole pandemic was no concerts, honestly. Like, because literally, I live at home and I work at home, right?
Right.
And so I'm at home a lot. And so to go out and listen to live music is just, it's wonderful. Art used to be my hobby. However, now it's my job 24/7. So it's still fun, but it's not really something I do just for myself anymore, which is okay. I mean, it's
Do
fine.
you miss that aspect of it though?
Sometimes,
Yeah.
yeah. Sometimes, I've actually recently been kind of getting the itch to go take some classes in something totally different. Just to give me something completely different, but still creative, just to do. I mean, not professionally, but just for fun.
Mhm.
And I may try to make time to do that, but yeah, live music is definitely what makes me tick. I love it. I love being in a crowd. I love that feeling where you connect with the artist on stage and you connect with everyone around you, and everyone's singing the same songs all at the same time. And it's 2 hours where you can just forget about everything else, and I love that.
Who's your favorite artist?
That's hard. So I grew up listening to country music. My dad liked it, but I had several aides when I was young that really loved country music, so I listened to it a lot. Um, I love Sugarland. They're wonderful people and incredibly talented, and so down to earth. Like that's part of what makes me love an artist is their personality and what they give back to the community. And those two are incredible people. Little Big Town also incredible people. Like my friend and I, who I travel with to see concerts a lot, we've been following them since they were, since they had one song on the radio.
Wow.
And they know us by name, and they know us well, because we, follow them all over the country.
So you're a groupie.
I am with certain people. I love Florida Georgia Line. I'm sorry, they're going to be taking a break soon, but because their shows are super fun and super high energy. Same with Luke Bryan, but I also love like Elton John, and I love Billy Joel, and I love. We just went to see New Kids on the Block. They were great. I like a lot of different types of music.
Do you have to, and I know the answer is yes, but what kind of special, if any, preparations or precautions do you have to take when you're in that big of a crowd?
So if I'm going to be where I love to be, which is in the pit, like in the middle of everybody in the front, I will only do that with certain people.
Okay.
So this friend that I travel with, she and I have been going to concerts since 2009 together. She will literally deck somebody for me if she has to.
Okay.
I can't, I mean, and it has happened. Like, because, people get rowdy and they get drunk, and it gets, sometimes it gets a little out of hand. And, I need to make sure, I also have an aunt that I love to go to concerts with too, because she's the same way. They're very aware of what's going on around us. I am always aware as well, but they're watching behind me, they're watching on my sides, they're making sure, I'm totally safe. So, I have to be with somebody I really trust.
Right.
Is your mom still at the point where she gets nervous or scared if you're going to a concert or going out? Like, call me when you get there, make sure,
I don't think any more than a normal mom.
Okay.
I get like last night I got the, okay, be careful. And, just call me when you're on your way home, that kind of stuff. But
Sure.
I feel like most moms do that. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
But she also knows that I'm going with people that, will keep me safe,
Sure.
and that's comforting for a parent. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, Katherine, final question. by sharing your story, what do you want others to learn, both with disabilities and those who may not have any disabilities? What do you hope they take from Katherine's story?
I really think it's the same lesson, which is, I feel like everyone has something to contribute to society. There's always something you can give, and you should always try to give it.
Right.
The thing that drives me the most crazy, we talked about this a little bit earlier, but when somebody has something they can give and they don't because they just don't want to, or they're too lazy, or they come up with all these reasons why they can't, and then they just don't. And that's really frustrating to me because, I've had friends, who I'm just like, you're so talented, or you're such a good person, or you could help kids or whatever it is. Why aren't you doing it? I mean, you should be doing it. That's what, you're here to do, obviously. And they just, for whatever reason, don't. And I think that's, it's kind of that, what you said earlier, if I can do it, you can do it kind of situation. So yeah, essentially, yeah, that. And I think too, people with disabilities, unfortunately, buy into that stigma of, oh, I have a physical challenge, I can't do anything, which is just not true. Especially with technology these days,
Right.
Especially with all you can do online, and it's just not true.
And I think too, and you've touched on it a few times, and you were fortunate to have two amazing parents who didn't try to put you in that pigeonhole of you can't do this and let you use it as a crutch to always fall back on. And I think that also speaks volumes to the remarkable parents you have and the remarkable person you've become. But I think it also shows people, look, if I can do it, you can do it also. And hopefully your next book will be a motivational self-help book, because I think I mean, you laugh, but Katherine, I mean, you have just, that's why I said overcoming, because not that it's necessarily going to, go away or be cured, but I think you've overcome limitations that easily you could have fallen back on and just used as a crutch or an excuse.
Yes, I agree with that. And it goes back to what you said about my parents. Like, yeah, easily I could have fallen back on them, but not with the parents I had.
Right.
Yeah, because they would not have let that happen. Yeah.
Well, I can't thank you enough for your time today. It's been just a true honor to get to know you and to talk with you. And we're going to have a link to your website. You have an Etsy store, Facebook, Instagram, and your LinkedIn page too. And hopefully our viewers and listeners will reach out to you. And, you might even get some emails asking for some advice or questions or help. And
Anytime.
I hope your story resonates with everyone and, encourages those who needs encouraging.
Yeah, that's the goal. Always the goal.
When you get that next book written, we'll have you back on too.
Okay, I'll keep that in mind.
And enjoy that concert tonight, Katherine.
Oh, I will. I will.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
New Orleans artist Katherine Klimitas was just 10 years old when she sold her first watercolor painting.
Oops. That might be a little much. Oh well.
But there's something else about Klimitas that casual admirers of her artwork would never guess. The artist paints lying on her side due to osteogenesis imperfecta, better known as brittle bone disease, which stems from a lack of collagen and leads to broken and deformed bones.
We stopped counting my breaks at 500 when I was 10. The thing with OI is that there's a lot of different severities, so I'm on the more severe side. It's really hard for me to sit up for long periods of time.
Katherine was introduced to art at an early age.
My mom was constantly trying to find things that I could do. When I was 5, she gave me my first watercolor set, and I got completely addicted.
Due to her disease growing up, Katherine was not able to do the same things as her peers were doing.
It's hard when, you watch your friends go out and play, and then, as a kid, Like, and you don't get why you can't go do it, right?
While looking at her paintings, you might notice a common theme. It's all about animals.
I have always been around animals. I've never been in a house with less than 3 pets. I've always felt like I connect with them, sometimes more than people.
Being in public isn't always easy for Katherine. From time to time, strangers like to stare at the woman in the wheelchair.
It's really annoying when adults stare or make stupid comments or whatever.
Even with her struggles, Katherine's parents never told her she couldn't do anything.
Parents were great, especially my mom, and she basically said, look, everybody's got a challenge. Like, everybody's got something, and this just happens to be yours. If you can find what you're good at, and then you can find a way to make that part of your work, then you can contribute something great, right?
Even if it might be challenging sometimes, Katherine proves that nothing should stop someone from doing what they love. For Tiger TV, I'm Sarah Boudreau.
I grew up with 2 parents who are veterinarians. Dogs, they've always played a major role in my life. I can't remember not having a dog. When I was 5, my mom gave me my first watercolor set. Art was something I turned out to be pretty good at. I am the illustrator of Breed All About Us. What I really love about this book, each dog tells you a story about them.
This book is very different. It's told from the dog's perspective. One of the ones I had the most fun writing was the Irish Setter. It just sounded like such a party planner. It's wonderful watercolor art, and it's also very magical the way she paints with the strokes that she does and the eyes.
If you can get the eyes right, you can get the personality of the animal right, then you've got a good painting. I broke a lot of bones as a kid. We stopped counting at 500. This is how I've always lived. It's not like it's weird for me. It just is. My mom was determined that it was not gonna rule my life though, and I still had to, go to school. And I was one of those nerdy kids that I loved going to school. I couldn't do a lot of the things my friends did. I couldn't go play softball or baseball. Art kind of became my thing, and it gave me something to do. It was something I really enjoyed because it was something I could do by myself. There weren't a whole lot of activities like that. Every kid wants something that's theirs.
Thank you for joining us today here at All Home Care Matters. All Home Care Matters is here to help families as they navigate these long-term care issues. We invite you to visit us at allhomecarematters.com, where there's a private, secure, fillable form where you can give us feedback, show ideas, or if you have questions. Every form is read and responded to. And remember, you can listen to the show on any of your favorite podcast streaming platforms or watch the show on our official YouTube channel. Just make sure to hit that subscribe button so that you never miss an episode. We'd also like to say thank you again to Katherine Klimitas for sharing her story of Osteogenesis Imperfecta. Thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you again here at All Home Care Matters.
Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to you joining us again on another episode of All Home Care Matters. To learn more about the show and to connect with us, visit us at allhomecarematters.com.